Hello there, it's Carly with the Expat Focus podcast. When American Sara Dyson moved to Croatia in 2012, she couldn't find any local resources in English to help her. So, as she figured things out, like residency and healthcare, Croatian culture and learning the language, she posted about it on her website, expatincroatia.com, to help other foreigners. Close to a decade later, Expat in Croatia is a full-blown business, and Sara is about to become a Croatian citizen. In this interview, we talk about why Sara moved to Croatia, the one giant grey area that is local bureaucracy and how to work through it, and what she loves about the Croatian way of life. Sara, thank you so much for joining me on the Expat Focus podcast.
Thank you, Carly. It's an honor to be here.
And you run the website expatincroatia.com to help other English-speaking foreigners, such as yourself, who are moving to Croatia. It's something that you did in 2012. Can you paint me a little picture of what it was like when you did move to Croatia?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Well, I came to Croatia and didn't know anything like about anything. I had no idea where to start. There were very few resources in English, even in tourism. Like there weren't any there weren't really any blogs. There were maybe like a couple, but nothing expansive, nothing, nobody was posting regularly. And also the tourist board websites were still in Croatian, which I thought was really fascinating. But to get anything about bureaucracy, like no way. Like, like that was all still just in Croatian, and the government websites were not like they are now. Now there's a little bit of English content, uh, and their Croatian content was even very limited. So you just didn't. It wasn't even possible to do research at the time. So when I got here, I just kind of relied on Croatians I met along the way to kind of help me. So I found a broker, which honestly, it's been 10 and a half years now. I have no idea how I even found that person, but that person's the one who helped me get an OIB, which is a national ID number. I had no idea what that was, but like she took me to the tax office. She helped me fill out the paperwork. She talked to the people at the tax office. And then she had introduced me to someone else about opening a company. And then that person is the one who actually took me to the police station to help me, apply for residence. It was just very much the Wild West. And the police station, when that's who handles immigration, when you go there, you go to the foreigner desk. So they only deal with the foreigners. But honestly, they weren't used to English speaking foreigners. They were only used to dealing with foreigners from other parts of the Balkans. So they're all speaking some version of the same language. They were under
Hmm.
no obligation to speak English to me. I mean, they still aren't, but no one would speak English to me. In fact, which, look, I firmly stand by the fact that you should always try and learn as much of the native language as you possibly can. But this is the foreigner's desk. Like, I just was there. And the woman that I dealt with, I think maybe the second time, she actually screamed at the woman that was with me, the Croatian woman who was with me, because I didn't speak Croatian. So it wasn't even like she screamed at me; she screamed at the other woman for it. Like, wow, this is
Very
intense.
welcoming country.
You know what? It is a very welcoming country. It's just the immigration can sometimes be a bit intense. Although, doing as much as living here as long as I have, and growing to love this country as much as I have, I kind of appreciate that. I don't know that many people go through exactly what I went through as when I first got here, but Croatia is a magical place, and I believe that there should be some filters. And so, if you can't handle going through that process at immigration, this isn't the place for you, because that's not an isolated incident. And whenever you deal with bureaucracy, you can encounter situations like that, and there are people that get too overwhelmed by that, and they're like, you know what, I don't want to be here. But I'd say 98% of the people who come and live in Croatia, they end up being okay with it, because there are so many other aspects to this country, to the people, the culture, that overwhelmingly overshadow any challenges you might have with the bureaucracy.
I'm curious as to how Croatia ended up on your radar. For me, I had a couple of mates at school who were Croatian. Otherwise, really, I suppose it was through Game of Thrones that Croatia really, in my adult life, was put on my radar. And to be honest, I haven't traveled there and I've lived in Europe for about a decade as well. So, how did you discover Croatia?
Whew, well, it was by accident. So I was planning a trip, my first trip to Italy back in 2011. I wanted to eat.
Perfect
And
place.
yeah, exactly, exactly. And as I was researching, I came across this dusty blog post that this American couple had written. And they had also thought about going to Italy, but in the end, they went to Croatia and they had taken a kayaking trip from Opatia, which is on the northern part of the coast, down to Dubrovnik. That is a tremendous coastline to traverse. And they stayed on all these little islands. Croatia has something like 1,200 islands or something, many of which are uninhabited. It sounded like an amazing experience. And they said in the end, they were so grateful that they came to Croatia instead of going to Italy again because it was cheaper, the people were nicer, the land was more beautiful, and the food was tastier. And I was like, what is this paradise I know nothing about? I didn't even know that Croatia like existed, like was a country. This was the first time it got on my radar, and I immediately needed to know more. So I started researching Croatia and I was like, oh, okay, well, maybe I can go to Croatia for 3 days and Italy for 7 days. And then it became, okay, I'll go to Italy for 3 days and I'll go to Croatia for 7 days. And then in the end, I only went to Croatia. I didn't go to Italy at all. And after that trip, I had wanted to go back to Europe, and ideally I wanted to go back to Amsterdam, but I couldn't make it work bureaucratically. And so I thought I'd give Croatia a try, and that's how I found out about it. And it's so funny how such a seemingly minuscule event as going down a rabbit hole on the internet can completely change your life. And that's what it did. It completely changed my life.
And you've since started a business where you are helping other foreigners navigate life in Croatia. What do you think is the attraction of Croatia to foreigners today?
Ooh, that's a good question. So right now, the world is in a very odd place. Now, I know that Croatia has only been the most attractive in the last few years. And there's a lot of circumstances that have created this kind of perfect storm of why people are coming to Croatia. So, one, about 3 years ago, start of 2020, Croatia substantially overhauled their Citizenship Act. And by doing one of the things that they did was they widened the possibility for people with Croatian heritage to apply for citizenship. So before 2020, you had to take a test on history and culture, and it was in the Croatian language. So unless you're fluent, it would be pretty challenging for you to do that, and that barred a lot of people from applying. Also, they had a limitation. You could only go back to like a grandparent. So they did away with the test, and they also did away with the limitation. You can now go as far back as your heart, as long as you can prove it, then you can go back as far as you would want. Actually, we had someone recently who's trying to go back to the first king of Croatia. That one should be very interesting.
Oh, wow, as
Yes.
like a claim for citizenship.
Yes, yes.
Oh, that's fascinating.
It is fascinating. It's really fascinating. So that's one thing. So we have tons of people with Croatian heritage who are like, "Ooh, I can now get nationality and I can maybe go and live there." And so that's part of it. So that's happened in the last 3 years. The second thing is the digital nomad permit. So Croatia had one of the very first digital nomad permits in Europe, and it has become the most popular program because of the benefits and also just because of kind of this atmosphere that you have in culture, which is have in Croatia that's very unique. So that's another big part of it. So the third part of it is the pandemic. So during the pandemic, a lot of people took a look at their lives and they realized it was not what they wanted. They wanted to make a drastic change. And it wasn't just that, it's also a lot of people looked at the way their government was handling the pandemic and they were not happy about it, regardless of what that was. So you have this huge influx of people that are choosing to live someplace else. And Croatia aligns with their values. It aligns with the quality of life they wish to have. And because of the permits that are available, you can at least, at a bare minimum, come to Croatia for a year. So all of those things have created an environment where tons of foreigners are coming to Croatia and they're seeking safety. Croatia is incredibly safe. They're seeking a beautiful landscape, which Croatia has tons of like unspoiled nature. It's not industrial. We have clean air. We have clean water. I mean, lots of people like to live by the sea, and we have this beautiful turquoise clear sea everywhere. It's not super populated, so a lot of people are coming from these big urban environments with tons of people. And I think past on the other side of the pandemic, people don't want to be around as many people as they used to. So that's part of it. And creations are, oh, you can get by in English. In most cases, you can get by in English. You don't have to
Maybe
feel
not at
like
the bureaucratic offices.
not at the bureaucratic offices. I mean, look, there's a myth that all Croatians speak English. That's a lie. That's not true at all. And anyone who comes here should try and learn something relative to how long they're going to be here and that kind of thing. But you can get by. If you're in a tourist center, you can get by. It's not like going to France where you really need to know French,
Yeah.
So it's all of those things. And also Croatia handled the pandemic pretty well. Like we never had any kind of major crisis. It's there's just, I'd say those are the biggest things on people's list as far as why they want to come here. And the culture is just an added benefit that either they've heard me speak about it because I love the culture, I love the people, or they get here and they just realize this place is pretty special.
And what is it that you love about Croatian culture and lifestyle?
Oh my gosh. Well, lots of
Just to
things,
put
but
you on the spot.
yeah. um, I could talk about it until next week, but I'd say the biggest thing is the community. Croatia is very community focused. It's very family focused, but it's also very community focused. So you have all these different kinds of communities, like big, small ones. You have a community just in your building. You have a community in your neighborhood. You have a community at the beach, like all the people who go to that same beach. You have communities at the cafe bars. Um, you have your work communities. You have all these different communities, and they're all tied together with this kind of unspoken understanding that you're all in this together and you're all humans and you all deserve mutual respect. I mean, it's not something that they ever say. It's inherent. And I think they thrive on human interaction, which I so deeply appreciate, because with social media and phones and everything in a lot of places in the world, that's where we get our interaction, is through the internet, through our phone. But in Croatia, it's not that way. Phones are used for the purposes of setting up coffees. That's it. So I'd
Really?
say yes, absolutely. So going on a coffee, like that's how they'd say it in Croatian. They'd say idemo na kavu, which means let's go on a coffee. So it's kind of like an event. It doesn't matter. You don't have to drink coffee. You could have tea, you could have Coca-Cola, you could have a beer. It's still going on a coffee. So that means let's go someplace and have a beverage and have a chat. And that is something that you do all the time. Like it's very common to have multiple coffees a day. I would never get anything done, so I can't possibly do that. But to give you an example, a friend of mine who's from Split, she told me how she's really concerned about a friend of hers she thinks she's becoming antisocial because she only has 3 coffees a week. And I'm like, what? What?
How is this
Um,
possible?
yeah, exactly. Like that's what you're worried about. But no, like you can have a coffee with anybody. It could be not just friends. It could be a landlord. It could be your plumber. It could be your mechanic. It could be your mailman. It, it's just, it's also the way that you even decide if this is someone you want to have in your life. It's the litmus test. It's the first date. It's with anybody, regardless of whether or not it's platonic. Like, you just sit and you have a chat and you have something to drink, and that's your time, and they give you their entire focus. They're not sitting there looking at their phone,
I was
wondering
going
what's
to
going
say,
on
but
Facebook.
is there a phone out on the table? Are there lulls in conversation where people pick up their phones, which is so common here in France and in Australia and the UK where I've been, and you know, are people walking down the street interacting with their phones more than other people, or is that just not there?
Younger people, I'd say, people that are, teenagers, maybe 20s, they're more tied to their phones because they came out of their mother with like a phone in their hand. You know what I mean? There's also an age thing. You just can't avoid that. But that being said, there's a huge focus on human interaction. I'll give you one more example to really kind of drive home the picture I'm trying to paint. During So we had the first lockdown like the entire world did. And then that fall of 2020, we weren't locked down, but our restaurants and cafes were closed. Okay. And even though the cafe bars were closed, which we have more cafe bars than people in this country, it feels like, even though the cafe bars were closed, Croatians would still they would go to like a tobacco shop, get a to-go coffee, and go to the same cafe bar and just stand outside of it in a circle of people to have their coffee. Why? You, that's how much of a ritual it is, that they continued that ritual even though they couldn't get the coffee at that cafe bar. It was closed. There were no chairs outside where they could sit, but they still wanted to have that time where they sat there in a circle and had a chat and a coffee and got to see each other. Like, that's how important it is, and they do it until the day they die. Like, you see men well into their 80s and 90s all just hanging out having a chat, and I love that, because life, we're not islands, and having that kind of human interaction is just so vital to us as humans. It's like oxygen.
And do you find that interaction extends to foreigners for locals in Croatia? Are they as in your experience as welcoming and inviting you into those coffee circles, or is there a bit of a separation?
That's a good question. So I'd say it kind of just depends. Foreigners who move here, for the most part, they all adopt that same coffee culture because they love it. They absolutely love it. It's How could you not? Now, as far as intermingling with Croatians, I feel like, are much more open to having foreign. It all depends on who they are. There are some Croatians have no idea. Excuse me, they have no idea we're here, which I think is fascinating. So you have to have some kind of overlap with them at some point. But if you make an effort, if you adopt the values, the culture, you're nice, you're engaging, you try and speak Croatian, they will absolutely like invite you on a coffee. Totally. It takes time to build a relationship with a Croatian where you can be invited into their home. That can take years, you know? And there is a ceiling you can hit with a relationship with a Croatian if you are not fluent, you know? But they are so welcoming. I think France is also a comparison. Since you're there, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I had a friend that lived in France for a very long time, and the way she described it to me was that unless you're fluent in French, like, it's pretty hard to get into a friend circle in France.
Yeah,
Is
I
that
would
accurate?
say definitely needed some base French to be able to just interact and even now, like I've joined sporting clubs in order to make more French friends and to be in those communities with French people, and I can be in them, but my French isn't fluent. So as you said, there's that ceiling, there's that point in the conversation where you just can't follow anymore, or you're the quiet one in the group because you just can't keep up and participate and really show off, I think, your possibly real personality as much as you could in your native language. But absolutely, they're quite welcoming, but you definitely like the language and having a certain level of it is key to unlocking that door, I would say. Yeah.
For sure. And that's the thing is the Croatians that are even willing to like open their door, their heart or whatever to foreigners, they'll speak English in front of you and they'll do that. There's just certain situations where if you've got like five Croatians and it's just you, like they'll still do it. They will still do it. They won't be super happy about it and they'll have sometimes they'll break back into Croatian, but they're so concerned about not being rude and being inclusive that they will still speak English. It's just, yeah, it's that ceiling. You can't get past a certain point unless you are able to completely engage in Croatian.
I'm currently distracting myself by the dappled light coming in my window and framing my head. So, if you're watching this on the Expat Focus YouTube channel or on the Expat Focus website, apologies for the distraction that is the sunlight at the moment, but we're moving on. um, on your website, Sara, you describe Croatia as one giant grey area when it comes to bureaucracy, and we spoke a bit about that earlier. You say that nothing is set in stone. So, how has that, I suppose, grey area of bureaucracy played out in your experience?
Ooh, well, I can give you a perfect example. So, in my third year, so I came to Croatia and I was married to an EU citizen. That's how I was initially able to stay here. Although Croatia was not even EU at that point. So it wasn't like we were just able to walk in the door. We had to open a company and do all these things. But in the third year, we divorced and the split police station didn't know what to do with me because they'd never dealt with my situation before. I was the first. And there
Your
wasn't
situation
anything
being a divorced partner of an EU citizen when you're not an EU citizen.
correct. They had not dealt with that before. And they're very kind of regimented in certain ways where it's like if it's not in the law, then they don't quite know what to do. Like sparks fly their
They
ears.
start bugging, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I also got fined as part of that. I don't want to get into the weeds of all of what that was, but so I was dealing with a fine. I was dealing with are they even gonna let me stay here? And I had a lawyer at the time. Thank goodness I wouldn't be here today without her. And she negotiated with them first. She got them to take off the fine, and which was substantial. And then the second thing was they voted on me. Like they're like, okay, well, we don't know what to do with her. There's nothing in the law or the rule book that like dictates the situation. So they got a few people together at the police station and they voted on me like it was Survivor.
Wow.
To yeah,
Just
to
people at a police station, admin staff at a police station voting on your future in the country. That is
yes.
crazy.
Yeah. So thank goodness they voted to keep me on the island because I wouldn't be here today. Um so I guess, they didn't have a problem with me. I hadn't caused any trouble. I was nice. I was humble. I was all those kinds of things. So it worked out with me. And then the second thing is when I applied for permanent residence, they should have applied a certain restriction to me and they didn't. And if they had, I would not be here today. So when you are a third country national and you're applying for permanent residence, you need to have a Croatian salary. Well, I couldn't go and get a job. So my only option was to open up a company. Now, if you want to open up the company and you're a third country national and you don't have the right to work, you have to hire 3 full-time Croatians and invest approximately 40,000 euros into the company. And they didn't make me do that. Why? Don't know. Don't know. But they didn't. And I know lots of people that they have applied that to. Um, those are two examples from my situation, but there are a number of situations where I think I need to maybe position this from a different way. So I'm going to enter a different way into this story. So that way it's a bit more clear. Whenever you're dealing with the bureaucracy, the individual human that you speak to has a tremendous amount of power, tremendous amount of power. They have discretion to either make things very easy or make things impossible and hard. Sometimes they'll just say that doesn't exist. I'm not going to do this for you. You can't apply for residence based on that basis because that doesn't exist. But it does exist. And that is, or they just don't want to deal with you. They're in either they're in a bad mood, or they don't like you, or you had an attitude, or I don't know, they broke up with their boyfriend, or it could be they haven't had their smoke break yet. It could be a number of different things that people could use as a basis to like not give you what you need. And if you are not educated enough to be able to push back, then there is nothing you can do about it. But there are scenarios where sometimes the rules say that it's supposed to be this way. Like you are supposed to have all these rules, but you get in a bind and you just can't meet those rules. And if you get the right person and you explain to them like, look, this is the situation I'm in and I need this, and I understand that you don't have to do this for me. I get that, but can you help me out? And they will bend over backwards and do flips to help you, because everything can be negotiated. For the most part, most things can be negotiated, which I love, because like I said, like if the rules hadn't been bit, I guess for me, I wouldn't be here right now. And that's crazy to me. If I were, the only other immigration I went through was in the Netherlands. And if you don't have exactly what it is they're asking for, you're gone. In America, you don't have exactly what it is that they're asking for, you're gone. Sometimes even if you have everything they ask for, they still make you leave. But in Croatia, not necessarily. There's room to be able to just be a human. And that's what I mean by gray areas. Usually things can be adjusted, but it also goes the exact same other way, where even though you have a legal right to something, someone will choose to make your life miserable.
So, speaking candidly, I did chat to an expat in Asia about his experiences there and how bribery was just par for the course in some countries, and that's what you do to get what you need. Is that sort of culture existing in Croatia, or is that not quite how they operate?
Okay, I will tell you, and I need to make sure that I say this properly, because I had a guide about how to like tips for dealing with the bureaucracy, and I got a call from one of our lawyers, and he was like, "You cannot say that, Sarah." And I didn't mean it the way that it had been read, but so I want to make sure that I'm very clear. Bribery happens. It does happen, but it does not happen usually at the levels that most foreigners are dealing. Like it doesn't happen with immigration. That would be a serious problem if anyone tried to do that. I have heard cases where it happens with like building permits and things of that nature, much larger procedures where in some cases that's the way to get it done or to expedite it, or in some cases where the bureaucrat, whoever is it that is in charge, the caseworker is just sitting there waiting for you to offer one. They're like, I'm not going to move a muscle until you offer one. So it's something that happens, but it doesn't happen as much as it used to. There have been a lot of changes, and a foreigner should never do that unless they have been
Don't
here
go
for
slipping
years.
some euro notes in with your citizenship application.
No, I mean, I've had a few foreigners say, "Can we just bribe them?" And I'm like, "No, you will not do that. Do not. That will backfire horribly." Now, I will say this. And again, this isn't something I would do with immigration. But there are some situations where it's not about a bribe, it's about a nice little gift, like chocolate or cookies or something,
Coffee,
and
yeah.
yeah, coffee, a brick of coffee. Yeah, it's always appreciated. Now, there are some people, I was having a conversation with someone recently about one lady at Split Police who would not accept any of that stuff, and she would get very offended by something like that. So you have to be confident that it's going to be well received, and it also can't be like, here's some chocolate, here's some coffee, like, can you make my thing work? That's not it. It's there's an art to doing something like that. But at the end of the day, being kind and humble and understanding and not being entitled, those things go a long way where you don't have to do that necessarily. So that would be my answer.
I saw your Facebook video where you talk about your Croatian citizenship application. So, congratulations to getting to the point where you're applying to be Croatian. That's so exciting.
Thank you. I cannot tell you how excited I am. There are not enough words.
You mentioned in that video that the local admin office is even rooting for you. That must be a really validating feeling and as we were talking about before, that feeling of like unlocking that door to being in with the locals.
Yeah, it's we specialize in the government. That's what we do. And while we do talk about culture and some other things, really like the government is our biggest thing. We contact the government a lot. We've even been blacklisted by the government a few times. But
Stop
we've
calling us.
yeah, yes, yeah. Like no, my colleagues, Lucia, and Maria, like they saw him on the caller ID, and also we have branded email addresses, obviously, and they got tired of us messaging, so we had to be a bit more strategic about how we did it. But we really just didn't know how how much they knew about us, and what we do, and it's really it was to go into the office to make the statement for my citizenship and have this woman tell me that they all know who I am, they all know who Expat in Croatia is, and that they're thankful that we exist because we're taking a lot of the burden off of them. That was so gratifying. That was I mean that and that they're all rooting for me for citizenship, like because of that reason. That's so cool. I've always wanted to make sure. I've never wanted to antagonize the government. Like never. That's not our thing. Like we always try to exude positivity and light and collaboration, and we're not enemies of the government. Like we may be
Helping
blunt.
demystify local rules for foreigners so they can actually, yeah,
Accomplish
meet the
have success.
requirements. Yeah.
Exactly. It's all about achieving success. So we've always tried to do that in a really positive way, and we've never wanted to say anything bad about the government. Not in like a, oh, we're afraid of them kind of way. We just they're government. Like their job's not easy. I don't want to demonize them. Like I can't imagine what they deal with, being at the foreigner's desk and having this flood of people coming in from all over the world, not just places that speak English, but people that don't speak English, who are coming in there and they're asking questions that they've probably heard 1,000 times that sound stupid and annoying, and they're just trying to get through their day. And I know because we deal with a lot of that stuff. I can't imagine what they're dealing with. So I have mad respect for everything that they're going through, and I'm really glad that they appreciate and see what it is that we're doing, because we are trying to help. Yeah, I mean, I run a business. We're trying to make money and stuff, but at the end of the day, like I did this for free in my off time for the first 5 years, and it was just to help people. And that's always going to be the biggest focus. And it's not just helping foreigners; we also help Croatians as well. But we're also helping the government, and it's super cool that they see that, at least at the split station. So yay, that was a big surprise, and it really warmed my heart.
And so when do you expect to hear news on whether you're successful in your application?
Oh, gosh, I don't know. There's a
This
bit of a
gray
mix
area?
up. Yeah, it's a bit of a gray area. I mean, my lawyer told me, she said, Sarah, if something goes wrong with your citizenship, I've got this connection. We call it veze. Veze is a relationship. So a lot of things are done based on relationships. Like, oh, I've got a cousin or I've got an uncle or this or that in the government. Somebody knows somebody who knows somebody. That's also another way that you get things done. But it's really important to me that I don't do this through Visa. Like I really want to go through the proper channels. I want to earn this on my own merits. It's very, very important to me. And anyway, so there's a bit of a mix up right now with the split police station is not interpreting the law as my lawyer is interpreting the law, is the Ministry of Tourism is interpreting the law. So there's a bit of a conflict there. So right now we're waiting for split police to send my application to Zagreb for processing. And once it gets there, which will be in the next week or so, then my lawyer is going to contact Zagreb and be like, hey guys, let's try and work this out. But they started processing it pretty swiftly after the end of the summer because they don't do anything during summer because it's summer. They're on the beach. So I'm really hoping that it'll be like by February would be my hope. But I don't know because this is I'm applying based on an article that is not used very often. Usually it's for footballers because to play for the national team you have to be a Croatian citizen. So usually that's what they use it for. It's not used very often for any other purposes. And honestly, I don't even know if Split even processes applications like that. So it's just not standard. It's not like you're applying based on heritage or based on being married. So it's hard to gauge how long it's actually going to take. But fingers crossed it's going to be by February. That's what I feel like could happen.
Yeah, well, you've got someone else rooting for you now too. So
Oh, thank you
let's
so
hope it
much.
goes
I
well.
really appreciate it. Yeah, like all the positive energy that can be put out in the atmosphere, I will take it.
You've been in Croatia for a good decade, but I'm curious about what you miss about your life in the USA and where you're from in Texas. Is there anything that you just can't get in Croatia that you really miss from home?
Yes, a good enchiladas and tacos. Really the things I miss are food. I mean, I have friends that I deeply miss and I wish that they could be here all the time. But aside from that, it's really just food. And even then, and this is something that you might be able to appreciate. In the first few years, you're like, oh, it almost hurts. There's things that you miss so much, especially along the lines of food or different products that you want to buy. But the longer you're gone, the more you realize that you can do without them, or you figure out a way to you find something that is a suitable replacement, or you find a
Yeah,
way to
sort of
make something at
substitutes.
home.
Yeah.
Yeah, you substitute, and then when you do go back home and you have whatever it is or see whatever it is or use whatever it is, then it just becomes a lot more special, like a novelty, I guess you could say. So I'm never homesick ever. To me, America's not my home. Croatia's my home. And yeah, there are a few food things, but that missing those things has really dissipated over the years, especially the last couple of years. I like okay, so this is my little hydroponic robot thing, and I grew cilantro in here, and I couldn't do that for many, many years. So there are ways that I'm able to kind of feed those needs.
You can't get cilantro in Croatia?
Not really. So they have these.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's difficult. I was in the UK a few years ago, and I was in like a Marks and Spencer thing, and there was this giant crate of cilantro, and I just like stuck my face in it. Like I didn't touch it, but like I hovered over it for a while just to like smell it.
Yeah.
So no, they have these like plants, like potted plants. And it's just enough to maybe do one thing with. It doesn't actually like grow more cilantro, and it doesn't taste like anything. So
Hmm.
you can't just go to the store and like buy cilantro. It just doesn't happen. So you really have to grow it if you want it. And it's a bit laborious. Let's just put it that way. But I've become so not used to it that when it's ready, I'm like, what do I make with this? I don't even remember what I used to do. But in the yeah, but like in the States, I'd buy a huge bunch of it every week and I'd use it in a million different things. And now I'm just so out of habit of using it. It just
Yeah.
now I kind of struggle.
You definitely adapt to what's available to you. Like in tropical parts of Australia, you'd have mangoes just dripping off the trees and that sort of thing. And now I only see them in the exotic fruit section here. Where I'm in France is definitely not, south by the coast in warm climes. So you can't have a lemon tree, let alone a mango tree or a passion fruit vine or something like that. And sometimes I'm like, yeah, something like that just, in my backyard would be so satisfying to have.
Yeah, absolutely. That and avocados. We have
Mm.
more avocados than we used to have here, but still, it's pretty hard to like get them because when you go to the supermarket, they're like already rotted.
Oh,
You know?
Isn't that the biggest disappointment? We do online grocery ordering, and when you order an avocado and they give you one that's like hard as a rock, you can't use it for 2 weeks, or it
Hmm.
is way overripe and gone brown, and you're like, what did I just pay for? I need to pick my own
Exactly.
avocados.
Yeah, there was actually a couple from California that started an avocado farm on the island of Beast, which is about a two and a
Oh,
half hour
wow.
ferry from Split. And we were all so excited. And I remember talking to them like, oh, we're gonna have a crop this fall, and then it never happened. And then the next year, oh, we're gonna have a crop this fall, and then it never happened. And now it's just kind of
Doesn't it
I don't
take
know
like
whatever
10
happened.
years for an avocado tree to give
See,
you fruit?
that's
Maybe
what
they
I
didn't
thought.
realize.
I think maybe not. Yeah. So maybe
A few
seven
more
years from
years.
now we'll hear from them. Yeah.
Yeah. I have one final question. You have an entire website of resources to point foreigners to, but if you had to offer one piece of advice to someone wanting to follow in your footsteps and make Croatia their home, what would you say?
Love it with your whole heart because that affects every single part of your life here. There are too often I see foreigners come here with entitlement, with who are expecting Croatia to be the way they expected it to be, or to be the way that their home country is, and to do things the way their home country does it. And they're never going to have success that way. You know, you've got to, if you experience something frustrating in the bureaucracy, swallow it and be fine and just move on. Don't make it into a giant life earth shattering crisis, because if you do that, you're never going to like it here. You have to really love Croatia. And when you just appreciate it for all that it is, you can open up your mind to this life that you never expected. And off the back of that, Croatia, because I have an advantage, because Croatia, like I said, has been their government, their bureaucracy has been my whole world for the last 9 years or so. And because of that, I have so much knowledge about how Croatia's system works and why it works that way. And I'm not saying it's not flawed, it has flaws, but a lot of things make sense to me. And I talk to foreigners from all over the world, and they share with me how their governments work. And all it does is reinforce that Croatia is doing something right. But you can't, if you come in here with this expectation that it's got to be the way you came from, you're never going to open your mind to that idea that Croatia might do things better than where you came from. So come here. If you're going to be frustrated for 5 minutes and then be a goldfish and just forget about it. Don't let it drag you down, and just accept Croatia for the way it is. It's not going to change to suit you. You're not entitled to it. Nobody has a right to be here other than Croatians, so just love it. Just love it for all it is, the complete package, including the rough edges and the flaws and everything, because you can't fully appreciate all the wonderful, magnificent, incredible things that Croatia is without accepting those other pieces too. So that's what I would say.
Well, along with the bureaucratic help on your website, expatincroatia.com, you also have some great articles and other posts about the beautiful aspects of Croatia and what you love about the country. So I do encourage our listeners to check that out, expatincroatia.com. And Sarah, thank you so much for spending time with me on the Expat Focus podcast today.
Thank you, Carly. It was amazing chat. I'm so happy for the privilege to be here. So thank you, and hi to everybody out there.
That's it for this episode. You'll find more interviews like this one with expats from all over the world in our podcast archive. Check them out on your favourite app, at expatfocus.com, or the Expat Focus YouTube channel. Sign up to our monthly newsletter to never miss an episode and claim your free guide to moving abroad. I'll catch you next time.